They all came for gold. So when you look at why people came to the United States, it's still true today. They came for economic opportunity. They came for family reunification or escaping hardship. And I doubt whether anyone in this room, unless you're Native American, somebody came over on a boat in some way. And so the same holds true of your ancestors and my ancestors. And in Lewiston, then we have groups like the Italians. The Italians came here, and you might be familiar with some of those names. Miranda, Arnone, in Italy, probably Arnone. Spinos of the fields, the Lupinaccis, the Grecos, Risponis, Alilos, Galanos, those names resonate with this valley. The blacks came here. This is Joe and Lou Wells out of Deary, Idaho. And after the Civil War, they ran a way house where people could stay the night and also provide them with food. And then German Jews. This is the Bernard family. And the Bernards and the Grostines and the Goldstones built a lot of buildings downtown. And also the Bernards built the Liberty Theater, converted the Liberty Theater from a farm hardware store. So they moved here. And then you have the Chinese, and the Lees and the Ings and the Yongs and Sangs and Loys and Lu were familiar with those names. All of these were immigrants. So all together, we're talking about why they all came and how they impacted our history. Well, if you go to China and look at some of the writings of Chinese immigrants that talked about why they came over, and this is a Chinese farmer in China. I work on 4 mile lot land, year in, year out, from dawn to dusk, but after taxes and providing for family needs, I make $20 a year. You make that much in one day. No matter how much it costs to get there or how hard the work is, America is still better than this. So you can see their motivation. And certainly in your history, all of your history and my history, you would have heard the same thing from our ancestors. I have a German background. My maternal grandfather came over on a boat prior to World War I because things were so bad in the Austro-Hungarian Empire at that time that he came over. And we have postmarks from his families who stayed in Europe. Send money, send money, send money. We can't feed ourselves. And so the same thing resonates with us on what this Chinese farmer was saying. Okay, why did they come over? When did they come over? They started coming over in the 1850s, 1840s, and they came over from Canton and the Guangdong region. And so generally when we go to a Chinese restaurant, we're eating Cantonese food. And the language is Cantonese because it's in southern China. And consequently, they came across the Hawaiian Islands, and Hawaiian Islands had a tremendous amount of Chinese Americans, and still does today. And then what they were coming for is Gansung, which is Gold Mountain. And so they came across on ships, and they ended up in the gold fields of California. And when they ended up, they thought that they were going to see streets lined with gold. It certainly had a lot of gold, but they were able to send money back to their parents and their families. And those young men came here to provide for their families. Well, in the 1860s, then gold was found about 70 miles away from here. And the Californians who came up, the white miners, brought with them Spanish terms because they came out of California. And so they moved up also to the gold fields. And they brought with them Spanish names and words and terms. Luna House Hotel, the moon. Oro fino, 2 words. Oro gold, fino fine flour gold. Oro fino was put together, and it's not where Oro fino is today. It's up further, and it was named, that town was named after the man who discovered the gold, Pierce. And so Pierce then is named after the man that started this gold rush. Well, these new gold fields drew worldwide attention. And so this is one of the only times that the migration went from the west and went east. Because generally we think of migration from the east going west. And what happened? We lost it for a minute. I'm sorry. Well, as we talk about that, I'll just wait to pick up on the slides. The Chinese came here later, a little bit later than the first men who came here as gold miners, because they weren't allowed to mine gold. And when they came here, their long journey, they had to have something to eat, so they took up other jobs. So those jobs were generally what the whites needed and couldn't do for themselves, like clean their own clothes and wash and press them. So in the Tribune, there was a story, not in the Tribune, I'm sorry, it was gone back to the teller. And the teller said that there was a Chinese man who was doing laundry during the summer, and they put an extra tax of $5 a month on him, and all Chinese that were experiencing this big business that they were doing, they put $5 on. So the Chinese man refused to do it. The true story in the teller. And so they arrested him. And he said, the teller did this Chinese accent in the reporting. He said, you make me pay $5. I don't have $5. Fine. White man, do his own shirts. Too hot anyway. Take me to jail. He said, at least I get 3 meals a day. So those kind of stories were out and coming out in the papers about how many of those people were working on the streets, and they did the laundry on the curb and on the sidewalks. I'm sorry this glitched. We're going to get another computer, I think, and try to boot up. Sorry, folks. Technology is grand. Well, I can see it, but you can't. Previous. There we go. They also came to build the railroad. And in that slide, you saw the railroad. And there was a lack of men who were available in great numbers to do the manual labor. Now, from the east to the west, it was a Union Pacific Railroad. And the 4 men put together a conglomerate to build from San Francisco to go meet in the middle. And that was the Central Pacific. From the east to the west was built by the Irish. And they were discriminated as much as the Chinese in many instances. The Chinese built from San Francisco to where the two railroads met. And those two railroads met at Promontory Point. And it was the Chinese that built it through the Sierra Nevadas. Are we going to get a new computer here? Anyway, the stories go that the Chinese men in the terrible cliff-like places that they had at the railroad track were put over the edge in baskets loaded with dynamite. Then they would make the holes in the cliffs and put the dynamite in, and then they would light the fuse and expect the white guys to pull them up. But a lot of times they took a trip across the gorge this way rather than being pulled up. And the Irish suffered the same. Hard labor, and I don't know what happened. Bruno's on it. He's the tech master. Are they coming? The cavalry, please save me. Rebooting. Good, thank you. Bruno, don't go away. So all of this is showing you how they got up to Lewiston. Now, how did they get here? The miners got here? Well, between the Dalles, this is from a newspaper in the Dalles in 1861. The road between the Dalles and Walla Walla, we were told is thronged by pedestrians all the way to the mines who are lacking the means to travel by steamboat or by a cayuse, which is a horse. They walked. Now, this is the only steamboat ticket, original steamboat ticket I found. It's in the Suffolk County Library. It's original, and it says the Lewiston Steamboat Company, and it was for the Mountain Gem, which was a little bit behind or further along in history. But that's the only one I found so far. Well, where did they stop? Remember, 70 miles upstream. So the first boat went right by here, trying to go up, but then went out in the Clearwater River. It was shallow and swift. So there was 22 sets of rapids between Orofino and the confluence. We don't see those today because most of them were blown out by dynamite by the railroads because it impeded the railroads, backed water up, and it went over their tracks. And you can still see that in the water. But anyway, it was too much to go upriver. The first steamboat went all the way to Lenore and Big Eddy, couldn't get through it, and said, beach is too small to drop all of you off. Let's go back to where it's nice and flat. We can put down the gangplank and we can offload all of you. Hence, Lewiston starts. And you can see the beginnings in this artist's presentation. This is 1862, first known photograph, first historical photograph we have of where we are sitting D Street. So about a block down here is where we're at. That's 3rd Street. And so 4th and 5th Street are on either side of this building. But you can see it's 1862, and it says WT, Washington Territory. So that's the first, we're right, everybody's close to the water. Why did everybody come? Because Idaho and Lewiston was producing 19% of the total output of gold of the United States of America. And you can see it ramp up. And you can see date after date. So it was a tremendous boom. And remember, this was during the Civil War. And during the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln needed the gold to finance the Civil War. And so he was keen and knew exactly where Lewiston was. Well, the miners came not in small numbers, but they came in large numbers. Not in thousands, but tens of thousands. So during this heyday, Lewiston was larger than Seattle, Olympia, Tacoma, Portland, all put together wasn't as big as Lewiston. It was the largest city in the Pacific Northwest. It had 10,000. And the other one, well, Seattle had 247 in the 1860s. It was, no one was there. So you can see the amount of miners. Now, put it in perspective, what today, at what gold is, 4,300 inflation, you're talking 11 billion, over $11 billion. So you can see why people came here. All right, the first instance of us documenting that there was a Chinese man here was 1862. This is the ledger from the Luna House. For the date of September 10th, 1862, and down at the bottom you can see that Hop Lee from Hong Kong, which is highly unusual for him to come to the best hotel in Lewiston and get signed in. So you have to, my theory, my thoughts are that he was an advanced man for one of the 6 families out of San Francisco. He wanted to see if there was enough time and effort to finance men to come and take the gold out. So he probably spoke English and was dressed really nice and cultured, and he was the advanced man. Is this worth sending crews? Well, they sent crews out, and it wasn't one Chinese man, it was walking. But where the other miners said, where are you going? 12,000 miles. That's the distance from San Francisco to Lewiston. And people got to know that's, oh, they're going to Lewiston. They're going to the gold fields in Idaho. And they didn't come in 1 or 2. They came in groups because they were obligated to go where they were told to go because they owed for that money to get them over here and taken care of. And they could send the money home, what they made above and beyond. This is Florence, not too far away from here. Now, how many Chinese were there? The Chinese, then you can see the darkest color is where the highest concentration. Over 30% of the population is that darkest color. So Idaho Territory, 28.5% of the population of Idaho Territory. There wasn't a small number. And in some areas, you would have to not take the 30%, but when the gold played out in Pierce, the whites were outnumbered 5-1. So it was about 80% Chinese. And consequently, it was a continuation of them moving around. And those Chinese that didn't or weren't involved and had paid off their debt then became part of our communities. So Henley and Soton, Boone, in Grangeville, Holly Demas, famous names, and Hugh Owen, who was at LCSC. He operated a dorm and he cooked. And what identified him, he was a good Christian. He had been converted to being a Christian. And he had a warehouse downtown, and when the warehouse caught fire, it was all the fireworks for Chinese New Year's. And all the kids remembered it because it was the greatest thing they'd ever seen in their life. The whole building exploded and went up, and it was fireworks in February. Now, up on the Snake River and into Hell's Canyon, we have a lot of place names that are associated with Chinese. Now, China Garden Creek today, most people call it Garden Creek, but it was China Garden Creek because it was a place that they could grow vegetables and they could grow things and sell it up and down to all the kind of mining communities and all the miners up and down in Hell's Canyon. And all those names are then place names within Hell's Canyon. Also, it's really interesting because this is 1922, and this is a photograph out of the Tribune, 1922. Then these Chinese residents were portraying miners because the normal school was renamed to Lewiston Normal School, State Normal School. And behind it is a building. I put some identifying marks so you know where they were on Main Street, just down by the courthouse. And so they were in a parade. Now, you can see also in the 1920s, they still were prominent in Lewiston. John and Ella Davies, the arrow shows you where that building is today. It's next to Brackenberry Square. Brackenberry Square is where the Hotel Idaho is in this photograph. And the Davies building is where Ridinger Photography is. And so both of their names are up there on the building. And their housekeeper was a Chinese lady. But I wanted to show you something that really shows the wealth and the money that the successful Chinese or had. And this is a Chinese family. And you see they have a white nanny. So that's interesting. And I'm going to send this out to the Chinese scholars and try to figure out where that came from. But I just want to show you the dichotomy of both. You know, they were part of the culture and many of them were very, very wealthy. Well, then we've all remember, not all of us, but we remember Ing's Restaurant and Ing Tet Loy, who was a fixture in this community for his whole life, almost his whole life. He was a teenager when he came here on a steamboat. And the Chinese culture is very, very deep and expansive in our history. The Majestic Cafe, George Ing, and then Ted Loy was at the Raymond Cafe, and the Raymond Cafe is where the wall mural is. The Raymond is that parking lot, and that was destroyed in 1950, but right where the historic mural across the street from the Center for Arts and History on 5th and Main. And so that was Raymond Cafe. But you can see that there were grocery stores, restaurant owners, people that served all of our needs. Well, the history of Lewiston and the Chinese goes back a long way because in 1870s, water was a necessity to keep downtown Lewiston. Remember, there was no normal hill at that time. And so the Chinese were contracted, a number of Chinese were contracted through these groups to dig a ditch about 2.5 miles up the Clearwater, and that ditch came and went off the base of the bluff. And that water allowed Lewiston to have the trees and gardens downtown. And they did that in the 1870s. Well, the red is where the Chinese population. And in the maps, it shows Chinatown, right on the edge, right here, 1 and 2. So they brought with them not only their culture, but they brought with them their religion. And so they established churches. The first one was over between B Street and A Street, right here. This is A Street, but then the floods completely took out A Street, and we don't have that anymore. It just washed it out. And the site of the temple moved, and the second one then was right where Lewis Clark Hotel and where warehouses are right there. And then the third one, after fires downtown in Chinatown with the wooden buildings, the Lewiston City Council said, you can't build these wooden buildings with these stoves inside. It's going to torch the whole downtown. And so we got to move because we're going to take out all these buildings that were damaged by a major fire. And you're going to have to do something. They moved down this way, down where the library is and where the Tribune is today. So number three. Well, and then number 4. So we're going to look at the temples that existed, have photographs taken of them. This one is the third site. The third site. And so over the door, we've reinterpreted what that said. And we have a wonderful, wonderful guide with people here who have been here a long time and helped us understand how to read the signs. And so Vincent, right up here, is a good friend of the society and a good friend and parcel of the Chinese Legacy Project. And Vincent supplied all the treats that you're going to take and eat, as if we didn't have enough cookies at Christmas time. So that is Litzing Hong. Is that right, Vincent? Close? Thank you. Temple of many deities. All right, now this is a picture of that same temple building from a different angle, and behind it is another building. And if you look way up, there's dark letters, it says LMT. That's where the Tribune moved to. And that was an old car dealership. And so they moved into that. So it's on the east side where the printing press is today. And so this is the third home right here. And the Hip Sing Tong, but all of the names that you're associated with then is it Joss House, or the Temple of Many Gods, or the Buckeye Mao Temple, or the Buckeye Temple, or it all depends on how you spell it. But ours is really the Temple of Many Gods. And reinterpreting that name may be a little stumbling block for most of us, but we're going to stick with what that original sign was on top of the door. I just wanted to show you the Hip Sing Tong. What is Hip Sing Tong? Then it's the social and cultural aspects where you can get bed if you're traveling through, if you're Chinese. You could play mahjong or any kind of Chinese games. You could get some food. You could play cards. You could stop a while, and it was where the men would come in to interact, sort of a social club. And so this plays into what we have as far as artifacts. Well, you can see this is the Buckeye Temple Society, and this is the last generation that there was that many young men. And this was a society to promote the temple, protect the temple, and they had Eli Thomas Inc., who was the caretaker. And so he took care of the temple And these young men, most of them left. And they went on to fame and fortune other places, and the population dwindled of the Chinese men and women in the valley, and they moved on. Well, what happened was Eli passed away, and the Tribune needed to expand, and so that temple was dismantled. Everything inside, all the artifacts were put into this building, the fourth site. Eli then is not there to take care of what's inside. You can see it's boarded up. And then without care, then it is sort of left to whatever the weather and vandals. Now, this is the Tribune building. So the Tribune took out the third site. Actually, it was dismantled. Everything inside was put into this building, block building, and you may remember it. And a lot of the men and women who worked at the Tribune sort of watched it. Anybody messed around with the building, they scooted them away or called the police, because now it's exposed and the roof is starting to leak. Well, there was a man who came out of this Hip Sing Tong society, and he left, got an education, graduate, goes to high school, and he left, and he came back, and he was very concerned because his good friend he graduated with was a publisher of the Tribune, graduated from high school together. Is that right, Bush? So the Alford family was very familiar with the Lee family and Gordon, and they graduated in '56. That's a lot to scroll through on the computer to get down to 1956, isn't it? I tried to find my date and spent 2 minutes scrolling down to when I was born. You know you're old, right? I mean, you have to do that. Not old, there you go, thank you. Anyway, he came back, and now he said, we've got to save all this because the roof's going to collapse, and all these artifacts, and the temple inside is 1880s, 1870s. We have to save all this. And so he and others got together and went to LCSC and said, let's collect all that we can and preserve it and restore it. Well, this is what it looked like at LCSC, at the Center for Arts and History. And Deanna Vickers and lots and lots of volunteers then meticulously cleaned everything, the dust and the grime and the dirt off of it, and they put this in the Center for Arts and History. And as they put it in the Center for Arts and History, a lot of people then could view it. But not all the artifacts were on display, because there was hundreds. All right, then, so this shows how it moved, and it shows you site number 5, which is LCSC. Now, they had a fire in the Center for Arts and History. And then all of that had to be cleaned again. And it cost a lot of money and time and effort on the college. And the Historical Society said, we can help. We'd like to help. We'd like to give it a new site. Because it doesn't have anything to do with LCSC's history. It should be where you could put it inside the Historical Society. So we started negotiating, talking about that. So this is not too far away from some of the original sites. Neither was the Center for Arts and History. All right, well, this is Nez Perce County Historical Society up until about, what, Paul, how many, 10 years ago, 8 years? When did we acquire the lot?
It's been about 10.
So
We rented it initially. We rented it
Yeah, we leased that, but this was the extent of what the Nez Perce County Historical Society owned. The Heritage House, the parking lot, and the museum. And then Paul Stewart, and I worked with Paul, we started to go, can we get that gravel parking lot on the right-hand side? And so after, like Paul said, 8 to 10 years, and we worked on that, we were leasing where the trolley is, and we acquired that extra land. And now we can go to the college and say, we have a site. We have the room to build something, build a replica, because it's too much for us to ask you as a college to maintain it, open it. It doesn't fit what you want, and it's diminishing in the amount of artifacts that are there. And so why can't we put it right there? Well, March of 2025, very quickly, the college decided, yeah, that's a good idea. And we entered into negotiations with college, and the college transferred all the Buckeye Temple, all the artifacts, the altar and everything else to the museum. And this President Dan Miller, Dr. Dan Miller, shaking hands to seal the deal. Now in it, we signed an MOU with the college, and ownership was changed. In that MOU, we told the college, we being the Nez Perce County Historical Society, that we were going to utilize a lot of services of the college, encourage classes, encourage independent study, encourage volunteerism. When the student comes down, they can get into our museum free. Just show your card. And also, we're going to incorporate the college as much as we can. So these brochures on the back were designed by the graphics students at LCSC. So we go back to LCSC to really tie in this whole project. Well, this is what it looked like after relocation. Things were spread out all over the place. They were not stored properly because after the relocation and the fire, everything was just put in a safe. And it wasn't on display. So you can see how many artifacts and how many things are still available. And this is all we could get into our current museum. We took a room, took everything out, and put the temple in the room. But we can't put it in because the original temple had huge ceilings. You can see it's almost on the floor. It was bits and pieces, but we only had 10% of what we actually have in storage. It's too small, the ceilings are too low, and hundreds of artifacts are in storage. This is what the interior looked like of the temple. We have extensive photographs inside the temple. And you can see the temple cloths, and Vincent could probably tell me who's standing there. And so what are we going to do? It's a 6th temple site in Lewiston. It won't be a functional temple. It hasn't been for 50 years, 40 years, 50 years or more. But the replica is going to be put on a piece of land that we have that will fit a temple replica. Now that temple replica then will look like what we have pictures of the 1880s. So historically, what does it look like? The outside will look like it, as close as we can to make it a replica. Just like the territorial capital, we tried to make it as close as we could to the look of it in 1860s. We will do the same thing. Now, this interior, you can see how beautiful it is when it's exhibited fully. This is the last time it was in the Center for Arts and History. This is what we envision the inside of this replica. And in the back will be the hip sing tong. And all the artifacts, or most of the artifacts, will be on display. And then hip sing tong will be on the other side of the altar. And this is the hip sing tong, and this is some of the artifacts that we're going to be putting on display. And I want to tell you, to close it out here, I want to tell you that in 1887, there was a terrible tragedy up in Hell's Canyon. In history books in the United States, they said the worst massacre of Chinese men and women in history was in Colorado. And about 25 people were killed. Well, that took a long time to research that wasn't the case as far as the largest and the greatest number of loss of life. It was in Hell's Canyon. But that research was not finished until about 2005, 2010, that we started to know the extent of the Chinese Massacre Cove and the tragedy in Deep Creek in Hell's Canyon, where 37 men were killed. So after that extreme violent act in Hell's Canyon, the Chinese community donated money. And you can see every one of them, their names were put on donor boards. We have all the donor boards from 1887, which we're going to display in the temple, or the replica. That'll be on one wall. And what we hope in this fundraising is to put your name on donor boards on the other side. Because now is the time to step up to bring that back to our community. It's part of our heritage. And so these are donor boards that show the 1887 donations, which totaled about $85. But in 1887, some of them donated 25 cents. That's all they had. But they wanted to make sure that there was enough peanut oil to light the lamps. There was enough joss sticks. There was enough of all of this to maintain that temple. So what's coming is a replica. The replica then is ours. It's our communities. I'm going to walk back here. And back at the back of the room are these brochures. It tells you basically the same story that I told you. And these brochures tell you how you can donate. We've already got people, we have people who have donated. We're well on our planning to, we have the designs for that building. The architect's already done with them. We have the construction documents. We're looking at a contractor. We've got thousands of dollars donated. You saw Majestic Cafe, the previous owners, kids who grew up there and worked their way through school, went to U of Dub. They still come back. And the Leon family. And they are really keen on helping. So we've got a lot of help and we've done a lot of organization, and we're going to go after grants to finance the building of this. This brochure tells you if you'd like to donate, then how you do it. And you can go to the website. You can do anything that you wish to do. And if you don't, that's fine. But we're presenting a number of presentations for you. So this is one in many that will keep you abreast of where we're at. We have the land, we have the design, architects already got drawings that that a contractor can build it. We've got money in the bank. We're going forward on this, and there's people that are gonna help us. And so this is the second one of a series of presentations, and you're gonna see more and more about this. It's our heritage, all of us, and all of us have been impacted in some way or another of the Chinese Americans in this community. So any questions? That is it for the presentation. And how about that? I made it in, well, with a glitch, 45 minutes. And that's good for me.